Hi, welcome to SBR Forum Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. We are about to do another game preview in the WNBA. We've been doing game previews now for a while with Anthony from SweetJones55.com. This guy is the real deal when it comes to analysis of WNBA and NBA. His threads on the forum get a ton of attention, and he's coming off a brilliant pick that he gave us last game where he not only gave us winner, but almost nailed the final score. Anthony from SweetJones55.com. Thanks for being back with us.
Hey, thanks. Hopefully we can have a similar success on this next one.
Yeah, that last one, that was amazing. I mean, you did everything right. You gave a pick, the line moved in your direction, it was a winner, and you even nailed the final score almost on the dot. You had a bunch of, it was interesting because in the last video you claimed that you were moving the line, that you would release the play through Twitter, and that the line moved in response to that, and certainly everything made sense when you looked at the time of your Twitter release and when you looked at line movements right after the Twitter release, but you got a lot of crap in the thread for that. What do you have to say what's your response to your haters?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of touts in general, they claim to move all these lines and all these, even in the big sports, they say, what they put in changes everything. If you look, I make college football plays, I've done NFL plays. I'm not claiming to move all these lines in all these other sports. Mm-hmm. The WNBA is completely different than most of the big sports because there's just a lot less liquidity, and a lot less action. So if you have a pretty decent following in this sport, it's going to move the line. There's just barely anybody that are betting into these lines. I personally have at least 30% of my clients are outside the U.S., and a lot of them play at pinnaclesports.com. There's only 2 to 3 sports books in the world that have their own WNBA lines maker. Everybody else basically just follows Pinnacle and whatever they're doing. So all it takes basically is one website to move their line in WNBA for everybody else to move. So it really doesn't take a whole lot. Like you said, I released that Connecticut Atlanta under I released. It had to move for 3.5 hours. It was stale at 153.5. I released it at 203. At 205, it started getting juiced. And then by 207, it had already dropped 1.5 points. 4 minutes after I released, after not moving for 3.5 hours. It's not as big a deal as people probably think. It's not like an NFL line moving a point or a point and a half in this market. It just doesn't take much to move these lines.
I believe it. So you're standing by your claim that when you release a play, it moves the WNBA early lines, and I'm a believer. I believe that that it absolutely is happening for all the reasons that you just said. All right, so right now we're going to talk about the game that you have an opinion on. Indy at Connecticut. Now this one, it seems pretty obvious to me what the side is. I might be wrong here, but just looking at the past performance of these two teams, Connecticut's a 1.5 point home underdog, right? They're 5-11 against the spread, but they're in a terrible tailspin right now. They lost 5 in a row against the spread, and then they won their last game against the spread as a 9.5 point underdog. They lost the game by 9. Indiana, the complete opposite. They're 8-9 against the spread on the year, but they had a terrible start to the year. 7-2 against the spread in their last 9, and the 3 road games in that stretch, they covered by a mile, by at least 14.5 points each time. Indiana -1.5. That's got to be your pick, right?
Yes, I actually released it at +1. There was actually even some +1.5, and then like I already said, it got moving to -1, which is kind of still basically the same thing for the most part in basketball. One is dead. So I would actually even still advise anybody that's listening to this to still play it at -1 and at maybe 2.5 to lay off.
Really?
But
because I would think that in a game like this, where there might be a huge edge, maybe you would reduce your bet size a little bit if you went from +1 to -2.5, but that you would still put a little bit on it at 2.5.
Just in general, I just don't like to. I kind of just like to practice, if you gotta always try to get the best line.
Sure,
Once the line gets moving, in the long run, it's really gonna kill you. So you don't want to make it a habit of taking lines that have moved, 3.5 points.
All right. Well, Anthony from SweetJones55.com. First, tell us what are some of the other reasons that you like this play so much?
Okay, so for some of the reasons you mentioned, the Fever are 7-2 their last 9 games, and they are starting to turn the corner. I think that the really bad early rough start was mostly due to the championship hangover. So they won it all last year. They end up going 1-5 to start the season. Then they get a bad blow. They lose Tamika Catchings, who's kind of like the equivalent of a superstar. LeBron James being lost. They lose another 2 games without her. But then she finally comes back. The team starts winning. They've won 7 of the last 9. What I think is happening here in this particular game and why the line is what it is that the lines makers are really factoring in that first half of the season and putting a lot of weight onto that really bad start. And I don't think that they've adjusted to just how good this team is and how much better they're going to be for the second half of the season compared to the first half of the season. And to touch on again, 7-2 their last 9 games, and that win streak's even more impressive because one of the losses was to the Minnesota Lynx, who is the best team in the league, and then the other loss was to New York, and they were up by 9.5. They just gave that game away. They really could have easily won. Connecticut, to talk a little bit about Connecticut, they're the worst team in the league at 4-12, and they really have shown no hope. They're 2-9 their last 11 games. They only beat Tulsa. Tulsa's one of the worst teams in the league, and they beat San Antonio, but they didn't even cover that game. They played Indiana 3 weeks ago. They were +4. They got blown out in the first half. They were down 18, and then they ended up losing the game by 12. They never really had a chance. The one area that Connecticut is really bad in, we talked about a little bit last time because the game preview is offense. This team doesn't score. In general, I've talked a little bit about WNBA games with you. I don't really like betting road teams too much because, just in general, if you look at WNBA history, a lot of the best teams in the league every year barely even go 500 on the road. But with Indiana, I feel pretty comfortable because this year they're 4-3 on the road. Even despite them having, this rough start, they're still actually above 500 on the road, and they've won their last 3 games by double digits. And just historically speaking, in the last 4 years, they're the best road team in the East record-wise. And then for some numbers, I think possessions is going to be huge in this game. A big part of the reason Indiana has gone on this big win streak is the fact that they force a lot of turnovers and they get a lot of offensive rebounds. So that even if they shoot a low percentage in a game, they could still win because they just have so many more field goal attempts than the other team. And rebounding the ball, I also think they're going to badly out-rebound Connecticut. Connecticut is the worst team in the WNBA allowing offensive rebounds. It's that's a big problem for them. And if you have a whole lot less possessions in a team, the only way to win is to get to the free throw line a ton, which they don't. They're the worst in the WNBA at that. Or you got to shoot a very high field goal percentage to make up for the lack of possessions. And they're most likely not going to do that as they aren't a very good field goal percentage shooting team. So, I really can't see much of a reason as why to take Connecticut. Everything points to Indiana. And a lot of people might declare this as a proverbial trap game, but I don't see it. I just think Indiana is the flat out better team at the line. I played them at +1. I just think they should definitely be favored. They are significantly better than Connecticut is.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and just as importantly, you also gave reasons why the line was where it was and why it is where it is now. That's always important to be able to identify when you're discussing a line that you think is off. All right, I think we got it. I think we got another winner here, Anthony from SweetJones55.com. Thanks so much.